Hi, we are the Good Ship Illustration, and we run online courses to help illustrators and image makers navigate a creative career. We are Tanya,
Katie
and Helen. We have about 70 years experience between us, each of us working in a different area of illustration.
Welcome to Message in a Bottle, our new podcast answering your questions. You can send your messages to goodshipillo@gmail.com and title it Message in a Bottle so we know what it's about.
This week we've had some really good questions about folios, and the first one is what to include in your folio. What are the best ways to present your work, as in which physical support for it, by which I think they mean what kind of physical portfolio.
Yeah.
What do you think of that?
Oh, when I first read this, I was like, the 90s called. They want their portfolios back. I feel like having a physical portfolio now, especially, so I graduated in 2012 and it was definitely it was on the way out having a physical portfolio, but we had one just because that's what they'd always done. But yeah, nowadays I would say you don't need a physical portfolio of printed artwork.
I agree. Back in the 90s when I started out, and you, Tanya, we were lugging folios around because there was no internet, was there? But now I don't have a folio. I would never take a folio out. People can look at your website for it, can't they?
Yeah. I think also, given the knotty question of fees, they haven't gone up a lot in the last 20 or 25 years. You can't afford to lose a day wandering around a city with a portfolio. So you've got to make your marketing work as easily as possible, and a website would be that. I mean, it is quite good to have one if you want to go and meet people. And in certain countries, it may still be normal to do that. And it is a nice way if you're quite sociable to go and chat with people. But yeah, get a website.
I always go and chat with people because when you write and illustrate children's books, your relationship with them is really long term. So I have relationships with publishers that have lasted 20 years. So I definitely want to go and meet them and a few times and have a chat. But they know my work. They'll have seen it on my website. They'll have seen my books. I never go to that meeting with a physical portfolio. It's just to see if we think we're going to have good chats, we're going to have nice times, we're going to work together and it's going to be happy.
Yeah. There could be a revival for the portfolio though. Now that it's kind of unused, another way to bring it back would be the VIP trip. So say you were going to New York for a week and you thought, I actually want to meet some art directors. You could call them up and they'd be like, how novel, how terribly retro.
It's extra special.
Yeah, they're going to pop in with a portfolio. But that could work as a kind of unique occasional way. But on the whole, save your time and get a website.
Yeah, that's reminded me as well. I've seen other illustrators on Instagram and things sending out lovely mailers, like fancy postcards. I know, Helen, you sent postcards.
Yeah, I did in the early days. I used to have postcards printed. I worked part-time in the Science Museum. I'd go home after work, I'd get a pile of postcards. I would get the Writers and Artists Yearbook, get all the addresses and send them out in batches. And actually it was really useful because then they'd stick it above their desk, on the wall above their desk. And sometimes 5 or 10 years later, somebody would ring me up with a job because they'd kept this postcard above their desk. So I think that's nice, because if you get something nice printed on paper, if it's really lovely, you're going to keep it, stick it on your wall.
It breaks through as well, doesn't it? It breaks through that kind of ephemeral email world where nothing is real. And if you're an art director who loves beautiful visual things, you'll definitely be doing the filtering, picking out the best visual stuff and sticking it on your wall. I remember people saying that they had seen a postcard of mine in other people's offices. So if you're in, even in a shared area, people walking through and they enjoy all that decoration on someone's desk, like whether it's a junior designer or something, you're still on show to a variety of designers in an advertising agency or in a publishing house. So definitely postcards or printed things.
Yeah, I think that's a good compromise, isn't it, between having a physical portfolio and if you know who you want to work for, the kinds of people you want to work for, send them something, but you don't necessarily have to lug this giant A1 portfolio.
Exactly, because if you post them something, then they're going to look at your website and that's where your folio is.
Yeah.
That's where you present your absolutely favourite best work.
Yes.
So yeah, the postcard or the nice bit of printed ephemera is going to point them at your website.
Yeah, it's the lead in.
Yeah.
The other thing people used to do was print calendars. Not those naff ones from a kind of
Yeah, you could do a risograph calendar. That would be amazing, wouldn't it?
Yeah, because then you're on their desk for 12 months with 12 great pictures.
Yeah.
So that's it.
Yeah. So there's another question to do with folios as well, which goes, I've heard so much advice about what art to show in my website. Right now, I've put up the art I love to make. I don't have any big scenes. Is that necessary? I guess they mean by big scenes like
full backgrounds.
Full backgrounds, like pull out and you can see a whole street or a whole room or a whole world, I guess.
I think that sounds like a picture book illustrator, isn't it? Or maybe a sequential one to think in terms of scenes like the big
I know in the
picture.
world of picture books, publishers do like to see that you can do a background. That doesn't mean a very realistic, detailed, everything is in their background. Even if your work is very simple and you just have a horizon line and a tree, that is a background. But I think in picture books that is important.
You talk about that in the picture book course. There's one whole module about dealing with scenes, isn't it?
Yeah, there is. Yeah, because people tackle it in such different ways. Sometimes people like Satoshi Kitamura will do a really, really brilliant wonky perspective, detailed background. And then who else I'm thinking? Wolf Elbrook might do something really, really simple where you just have a torn piece of turquoise paper which represents, say, the wallpaper in the background and the character is in front of it. So there's loads of different ways to tackle it, but you definitely do need to show backgrounds if you want to do picture books.
Yeah. And if you're not a picture book illustrator and you're thinking about putting stuff in your portfolio, I would say just put in the work you want to do more of, because when potential clients, potential publishers, whatever, see that you've done something, they're like, that's what you do. They don't know any better. They don't know that you hated it and it was like pulling teeth to create this artwork. So make your life as easy as possible and just put the work in there that is fun, easy for you, feels good, you like it.
It's true. I mean, this is developing this career is about building a long-term life for yourself that you enjoy. And too often in the early days, in an effort to please, we're like, what do you want me to do? I'll do it. Just say, I'll draw anything. And that's going to give you so much heartache and exhaustion. And what Katie says is quite right. Just do what you love to do and be narrow. You don't have to be everything to everybody and to be able to draw everything and work in different styles and different approaches. If you follow your nose and do what you love, you'll start to hone down a strong identity for yourself.
Yeah. When you focus on your strengths, you become like a rocket.
Yeah. If you put a piece of work in that folio that you don't like, you're guaranteed that that's the one people want you to do again and again.
Sod's law.
Yeah,
every time.
That was the first thing I heard from one of our tutors who came back. Strange, this was fine art, but I remember her saying, when I went out there, she must have done an illustration, and she said, if you do 4 or 5 versions of something and you include 2 that you think they'll like but you don't like, that she said that's exactly what happened. And it was the first best bit of advice, and it came from a fine artist. It does make you wonder though, why do they commission you if your best taste is rejected and your worst pictures are picked up? That bit always makes me worry.
Yeah.
But you're with a good you've got a good relationship with an art director if they pick up your best pieces.
But if you're offering them a few different versions and there are ones you don't like, you're not holding yourself up as the advisor. So before you show them the stuff, you need to know what you love. Yes. And then you can say, I like these 3 pieces and these are good for these reasons. It's like the power's the wrong way around. If you say, have a look at this work I really don't like, but your opinion might be more important than mine.
That's so true. And that's good life advice. Like never offer something that you don't actually want to give.
Yeah.
Because if you're like, I could do this, and they're like, cool, and you're like, yeah. Why did I say that?
Exactly.
Yeah. Applies to portfolios too.
So there's another question coming about folios, which goes, besides the usual stuff, like setting up your folio to the target market, what does your cover letter look like? How do you show experience? How do you reach out to prospective employers?
This is a brilliant question.
Yeah.
And I think the idea of a cover letter, that's for traditional job getting. A cover letter makes sense. Like, I would like this job because I'll be really good at it. But I think all of our experience.
Yeah. I've never written a cover letter.
Yeah, cover letters are not a thing.
No.
The closest thing to a cover letter might be your about page on your website, just where you show that you're a normal human being who's going to be reliable, can draw the pictures. Well, not even a normal human being, a reliable human being. You don't have to be normal.
And show a photo as well. That's important.
It's always nice.
Because people connect.
I think you've got to, like, your folio on your website is like a party and you're inviting people into who you are.
Yeah.
So the idea that you're going to approach one person at a time with a covering letter is just, it's laborious. It would take too long.
Yeah.
You're better to have your website looking amazing and then use your social media to point people at your website, and you're inviting people to you. So it's those people who should be writing emails to you and not you.
But there is an exception to this rule, which would be if you're approaching an agent or even the small stuff like LinkedIn, if you're connecting with someone and you don't just want to send them an anonymous LinkedIn without a note, you do have that kind of maybe 2-sentence thing. I'm an illustrator who really enjoyed looking at the work that your company produces, that kind of thing. Could we connect? Or if you're going to an agent, you do need to write a kind of basic covering letter explaining, outlining what you do. Yes. Always mention why you're approaching that agent, why you think you're a good fit. And it shouldn't be because you look like everyone else in their stable, because they don't want any repeats, or they don't want to double up. So you've got to describe why you're different, yet you're attracted to that agency. So I mean, those are quite simple to do. Just reference what they have in their on their website. Quite often it's reading what people say about themselves and repeat it back to them a little bit in your letter.
Yeah. They also said, how do you show experience? And it's a tricky one, especially if you're starting out. You might not have any clients or names or logos or whatever, but experience is just showing that you can do the work, isn't it? Like, so if you've got your best work, it's like inviting somebody to your house after you've hoovered and cleaned. Like, you can show them all the nice things.
Also, if you have experience but you don't like the projects you did, you don't need to show those projects. You can have a list of clients and you just add that client onto that list. But you don't have to show the work that you're not happy with. Katie, on your website, you use people's logos along the bottom of your website, don't you? Which is really a good idea.
And I have to, because so much of it's top secret, NDA, like, do not tell anybody, because it's like strategy, company numbers and stuff. So yeah, just say like, here's all the glamorous people, and here's some of the work that I'm allowed to show. It gives you the general idea of what I'm going to do for you.
Do you have to ask their permission to use those logos?
No.
So you find the logos and you just, that's actually something I was thinking about doing for my site.
Yeah, you should. I mean, it shows credibility, shows that somebody's hired you for a big job.
And it's much quicker, isn't it? The instant recognition of a logo rather than reading a client list is much more immediate.
I mean, on my website, it's like the first thing you see is my face and my work's behind my face, and then the next thing you see is all these logos that you've heard of, probably. And then the next thing is like, get to know me a little bit. Because I think, especially on the internet, we're in a rush. Everyone's got like, so if you think about what's above the fold, like what's the first thing people are going to see when they click on your website? That's like the very first impression. So I've been on some people's websites where it's like, click to enter. And I'm like, oh, you've lost me already. Like, I don't have time for this.
Like, I was talking to publishers about that recently when I was making the picture book course in some of those interviews that we did. And I was saying, where do you find people? And they were saying, Instagram. They look for picture book illustrators on Instagram. They like it if their feed has lots of examples of their work. They like to see the behind the scenes stuff, but not too. They don't want to see 20 pictures of the dog and then one illustration. They want to see, 5 illustrations and then their desk and the paints they use and then the dog and then more illustration. Yeah. But what was I going to say about websites in that context? Oh yeah, that what you were saying, Katie. They don't want to have to click through. Here's my picture book illustration and here's my whatever illustration. Here's my whatever illustration. It makes it difficult to find what they're looking for. It needs to be really simple.
It's got to be immediate. Get your best images right up in front of them from the get-go. I mean, a good landing page with your best illustrations. But also, she was talking about experience. Illustration is quite a forgiving industry because a lot of creative directors will look at websites, and if they see your work and you can maintain a consistency across your work and you're not trying out loads of styles so they don't know what they're going to get, if they can, you may not have a huge amount of experience, but if you've got a strong visual identity and it's maintained, they're not bothered that you have experience or not. If anything, they want to pick up on young, fresh illustrators, especially for kind of digital projects and new markets. They're looking for really edgy illustration. So some kind of vulnerability, or I can't think of the word, that naivety and that freshness is really attractive. It's like fresh blood for vampire creative directors.
Yes.
And there's another question that's come in about folios as well. do you have any tips for people who enjoy making art in many different themes? Is it better to narrow down and focus on one or two things? If yes, how can we really find out what the theme is in our work?
So the best answer to this is it depends. It depends what your goals are, like what are you trying to achieve, because you can do, like you're a human being with free will, do whatever you want, but if you would like people to know you for doing something,
if you don't know what your themes are, the things that interest you, the things that you want to draw, we really, really dig into that in our Freak Flag course, don't we? About how to really discover what are the things that you come back to again and again and again in your life, and that is what makes you you, and that's what makes your work stand out.
And it makes you have a much better time in your career if you're doing stuff that's fun and easy for you and that you love doing.
Yeah, we develop some strategies to do that, because it sounds easy, but it is quite hard to look at yourself objectively and figure out who you are, because part of you, especially new illustrators, are panicking, thinking, I can't be important, it doesn't matter who I am, I just need to know what the market needs me to be.
What's the trends? What's happening right now? But it's not.
That's exactly it. That's why we started Freak Flag, because you've got to ignore the trends. The trends are oversaturated. There's too many people doing it. And that's why we have these kind of huge turnovers of identities in subject matter and styling. And if you join into those, if you join those trends, you'll be kind of thrown by the wayside as they change. So it's a really valid question to say, how do I narrow these things down? I mean,
you can have two different types of websites, folios as well, can't you? You can have one where you've narrowed it down to the things you're obsessed with, or you might be the kind of illustrator who likes to do a bit of everything, like cars, houses, children, dogs. They might have a tick list and do them all, and they love it. Well, I'm definitely not that person. Like, I start with a feeling about something. I feel I might want to draw this, and I really do not want to draw that. So it really depends, doesn't it? It's up to you. You present what you are.
Yeah.
And there's so many different markets for it. So for people who have a great technical ability to draw almost anything, then there's certain sectors of the educational market that are great for that need all these scenarios drawn and typical everyday subject matter. But if you want to be an illustrator with a very strong identity who works within advertising or design or children's books, you've just got to find out what you're drawn to and what really rocks your boat, really.
And it can feel scary doing that, because you feel like, I love all these things and there's all these strings to my bow and I want everyone to know about them. And like in the course, obviously getting support with that is really helpful, because you're not killing off all the other things. All those other things still exist. It's just you've got more clarity in what you're presenting in your folio, which is what a folio is all about, isn't it? It's like a presentation of your work on your website.
You start to prioritise, don't you? And, in terms of colour, methods of visualising things, your identity could be purely your weird way of imagining things. It might not be about the drawing or about the colour that you use. It could be just you've got a really crazy psychedelic approach to stuff, and you can't draw cars. You can only draw dragons. You almost need someone else to tell you who you are. Perhaps you could talk to close friends or people who appreciate what you do and ask them to describe your strengths back to you, so you can start to get some sense of who you are and then focus on that.
I find it really useful looking at other people's work, and I don't mean by that look at other people's work and copy it. What I mean is, like, I look at the books I was really drawn to, that I've always been drawn to, and what are the themes in there. And I've realised that I really like books that are full of warmth and feeling, like warmth and heart and truth. And so when you work out that's what you're drawn to, then you know what kind of illustrator you are.
Yes. What ticks the boxes in your brain.
Yeah.
The little light bulbs go off.
Yeah.
But you're also an author, so you have control over that content, which is really interesting. I think that's a privilege that a lot of other illustrators don't have, because, as we talked about earlier, that kind of divide in the market. Katie and I were saying, well, we're more like a service industry. You give us a brief and we draw to it, whereas you're the creator of the content and the image. So a lot of your love of truth and feeling and honesty must come through the story that you're able to write.
Yeah, it's good because I write my own brief.
Yeah.
It's a totally different way of working, isn't it?
Even the relationship length, because you always talk about having these long relationships with publishers and things, but
they go on for years and years and years and years and years. So you two have quite quick turnover.
We're cheap dates.
That's what it is.
I'm a serial dater.
But you do have some long-term clients who come back again and again. Both of you do, don't you?
Yeah, some people come back year after year, and that's really nice. But for the most part, it's like, we've got an event next week, can you do it? And I'm like, yes. And they're like, thank you. And then I do the work, and I'm like, that was brilliant, here's some money. And then, the next person comes in. You can't really fall in love with each person. It's no time.
I used to work for a newspaper in Hong Kong, the South China Morning Post, and I had a regular weekly slot there. Sometimes I'd do 2 to 3 different illustrations in different parts of the Sunday magazine. And then one day they invited me to the Christmas party, and I was like, oh no, real people who work in that office together, and I'm the one, they don't know what I look like. I know the art director, but I don't know anyone else, and I'm illustrating for their features. It was the strangest experience. Like, we're supposed to know each other. You've worked for us for 3 years and no one knows what you look like. So that side of it, editorial illustration, is quite weird because you're often doing fast 1 week turnarounds for different art directors, and those art directors move positions. They either take you to their new publications with them, or you just work for a lot of different ones, and it can be quite cold, can't it?
Yeah, a little bit.
You're not building relationships.
I was like, bye. No remorse.
But the more we do this, the more I look at children's book illustration and think, what an incredible area it is. You know, you have full control over the creative content, the visual, the story. It's really fascinating. We were saying before how when you're on your own being an illustrator, you think, this is illustration. What I do defines illustration. But when the 3 of us got together and talked about how our creative careers are completely different, you think, that's a totally different interpretation.
It is. It's so interesting when we've been making the courses, isn't it? Because when we were talking about folios, Tanya, I can remember you saying we should write a list of what people need in a folio, and I was like, no, why would you do that? Yeah. So we all just have completely different.
Yeah, I'm just like, only show the things you will do, nothing else.
Yeah, it's really interesting. That's why we wanted to make the Good Ship, isn't it? Because we'd meet up for coffee and we'd all chat about what we do and realise that we all had a massive amount of information we could share. And it was new to all of us, even though we're all illustrators. It was all new and interesting.
It's like the tip of the iceberg is that we all draw pictures.
Yes.
And then below that, everything's different.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally. Like, you know, people would send me questions, or ex-students would say, what do they pay for a children's book, or how do I get an agent? And I think, I have no idea. I have to ask Helen about this. They are very complex and different worlds. But they have, it's interesting looking at them to, you know, in unison in this particular situation. But also the British experience and the American experience and the Asian experience are all completely different as well. Because when I taught at Savannah College of Art and Design, we had a lot of students from the Philippines. And what you could say was true about pricing or expectations in Hong Kong or in London wasn't true if they went back to Manila, where the pay would be a lot less. You'd have to be a lot more able to produce a variety of different illustrations if you wanted an income that sustained you as an illustrator. Some of the luxuries of saying, oh, I'm just a kind of digital illustrator, or I'm just this, I'm just that, didn't work within that economic framework. So every time I thought I'd figured out an answer, I would find another layer of complexity that meant that wasn't true for that set of illustrators.
Yeah. It's true for all of it, really, isn't it? Everything's like, it depends.
It depends. But now we have the global world, and you know, you're working all over the world digitally, live illustration. Maybe these things will be ironed out, and you won't have to have kind of areas where it's barely possible to make a living because the fees are so low. If you have access to our global market, you know, things start to balance out a bit more.
Definitely. And having that many people able to get in touch with you means you say no to, well, so many people say no, or you say no to so many people, but there's still a handful of really juicy jobs that go ahead.
Yeah.
So it's all right.
And it wasn't like that in the 90s. Dinosaur era was if you blotted your copybook in London with, you're done for, you'll never work in this city again.
Well, that's a really high note to end with.
Yeah.
So basically the questions about folio are answered with, it depends.
Yeah. We hope that was helpful.
So we're going to finish on this one and start a new message in a bottle for our next podcast. We've got lots of good questions to answer. Yeah,
so send your message in a bottle in, and if you'd like to learn more about the Good Ship, you can go to www.thegoodshipillustration.com, and we also hang out on Instagram. We're at The Good Ship Illustration. And yeah, we'll see you later.
Brilliant.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.